It's time now for an in-depth look at the global market action this afternoon. And for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Junsok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Dr. Yang, thanks for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
So the U.S. and China are going to have their own summit during the G20 later this week. Now there's talk of a U.S. court taking action that would really be crippling against Chinese banks as part of a case with the North Korea sanctions. How's the market going to react if there are sanctions on these banks in China?
Okay, well, the bank under the question seems to be Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, so that has not been confirmed. It's the ninth largest bank in China, and its assets are roughly $900 billion, which makes it comparable to size to Goldman Sachs in the U.S. The SPDB, the Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, has no U.S. branch, but it does maintain accounts in the U.S. to handle U.S. dollar transactions. And what the court ruling basically says is that if the SPDB does not comply with U.S. requests to provide information on the dealings that they had with a front company for the North Korea, the Attorney General of the United States or Treasury Secretary of the United States can terminate the bank's U.S. account and ability to process U.S. dollar transactions. Now, if this was an international bank, that would basically mean it's a death sentence for that bank. But the SPDB, because it does not have a lot of global presence, it might be able to survive the U.S. order, but the concern here is that because it is the ninth largest bank in China, Chinese government may deem it too big to fail, so it may try to prop up the bank somehow, and also it may reduce credibility, it may reduce confidence in Chinese banking system, which could blow into a major financial crisis in China, and if that spreads, it could go up to the financial crisis throughout the region or even globally. But perhaps the concern here is that even though there is that large risk, a lot of U.S. congressmen as well as the Trump administration is looking at this measure seriously because they want a harsher crackdown on North Korea.
Got it. That'll be an interesting dynamic there in Osaka coming up. But now looking at South Korea's exports for a minute, the U.S. has lowered its duties on Korean steel. The steelmaker Posco had given up for a while, but will be looking presumably to go back to shipping to America. Is the Korean industry breathing a sigh of relief right now?
Okay, well, if you get a bit more technical here, there were two types of tariffs that were hit on Posco and Hyundai Steel. First is anti-dumping, which means that U.S. believed that these companies were selling steel too cheaply in the U.S. And then there's countervailing tariffs, which means that the U.S. is putting on tariffs because they believe that Korean government was giving unfair subsidies to these companies. Now, the ruling by the U.S. basically raised the anti-dumping tariff slightly, but reduced the countervailing tariffs greatly. So overall, the tariff burden on these two firms came down. Then that should give more room for these two companies to export. There's an interesting aside here. There was an interesting case decided by the U.S. Court of Appeals on the 21st, which basically pitted U.S. steel companies against Korean government and Korean steel companies. The U.S. companies were claiming that Korean government was giving subsidies to Korean steel companies through low electricity rates, but the U.S. court found that to be the wrong criteria to use. So that may be part of the reason why the countervailing tariffs have been lowered, not only for the Hyundai and Posco, but also for other Korean steel companies. But having said that, Korea is still subject to the steel tariffs that Korea and President Trump negotiated. So even though Hyundai and Posco are now going to be able to export more, it will still be limited by that tariff, by that quota, and that means competition among Korean companies rather than competition between Korean companies and foreign companies.
Well, in another U.S. issue, the Korean government's asking the U.S. to get rid of the safeguards it put in place last year on washing machines from Korea, saying they're not hurting American industries. Now, Korea will be looking to win at the WTO on this issue as well. What's going on here, and how do you see it working out?
Okay, well, the washing machine safeguard is not even popular in the United States. The recent study that came out in April says that after the safeguard on Korean washing machines, the washing machine prices in U.S. rose by 12%, and interestingly, the dryer prices went up by 12% as well. And the study basically concludes that there's not enough competition in the U.S. washing machine industry, and that's why the prices are going up. And it's the consumers who are paying for this. The cost for the U.S. consumers have been estimated to be $1.5 billion, but the job creation due to the safeguard in the United States has only been about 1,600 jobs. So it comes down to about $800,000 per job created per year, and that's a really silly way to create jobs. And even worse, last year, the company that headed the attempt to put safeguard on Korean washing machines, Whirlpool, did not make a profit, though they may be doing better this year. Samsung and LG kept their market share and kept their positioning as the largest washing machine sellers in the United States. So it's really questionable whether the washing machine safeguard did any good at all. Now, having said that, though, it really comes down to what President Trump wants. If he wants to maintain the safeguard, then he'll probably maintain the safeguard. Even if Korea takes the case to the WTO, it's going to take at least 18 months, probably closer to two years to get the case through the WTO. So even if Korea wins, President Trump has the option of maintaining the safeguard for another 2 years. That's if he decides to even follow the WTO ruling at the end if Korea wins.
All right, very informative, Dr. Young. We're going to leave it there, though. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you.